Student athletes, college football players, they have to be cognizant of the brand that they want to create, not just for today, but going into the future.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Perspectives podcast. I'm John Miller, editor of Tech Perspectives. As of July 2021, college athletes have the right to profit from their name, image, and likeness, or NIL. There are many criticisms of NIL rights going to athletes, including that it will only benefit better off athletes and schools. Tim Derdinger, our guest today, recently published a paper, Does Personalized Pricing Increase Competition? Evidence from NIL in College Football in Management Science, with his co-author Ivan Lee. And that paper claims that NIL has increased competitive balance and broadened opportunities for athletes. Tim is an associate professor of marketing and strategy and also the academic director of the Center for Intelligent Business at Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business. Tim Derdinger, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to talk about NIL and the impact it has had on the competitiveness of college football.
Great. So your paper suggests that NIL has not created a rich-get-richer dynamic, but it's instead increased the dispersion of talent. What does this mean for the future of college football?
It means a lot. I think in the end, it means that we're going to see as fans better football games. Part of our results of the paper have shown that the NIL era has led to tighter spreads in outcomes of football games, and then also tighter betting spreads. And so this is great for fans who cherish and relish tight rivalry games, or even just games between non-rivals within conferences that are just competitive. We're no longer should be seeing too many blowouts in the NIL era. It also our results should provide some emphasis on and direction for the playoff committee to expand it. Because if we're going to see more competitive outcomes in games and the top 25 being more competitive, there's an argument now to be made for a bigger playoff at the end of the season instead of 12 teams going to the 16 teams and having these top 16 schools compete for the national championship like we see in college basketball.
Yeah, and you also highlight in that paper that some of the top-tier recruits are now choosing what are termed as temporarily embarrassed programs. So they have strong fan bases, but they've had recent poor performances. How might that strategy pay off for both the player and the program?
I know you didn't want to call out my alma mater of USC as one of those programs, but I will. Lincoln Riley, get your act together. Our results of our paper really highlight that five-star athletes are making some different decisions in the NIL era than they were before. Before NIL, and these top 30, 35 college football players that are labeled as five-star athletes were going to schools that would help them get drafted, going to schools that have high prestige in terms of their reputation. And that was the way to measure their success and then help them get to the NFL. And the post-NIL era, in today's world, what we're seeing is that these same athletes or the same type of athletes are now making different decisions. They're going to lower-ranked or lower-quality football programs, as you described them, temporarily embarrassed, still having a large fan base and strong support, but just aren't playing up to their caliber. And they're going to these schools because these schools are paying them now. And they're paying them more money than a top program would, like in Alabama, Michigan, Texas, Ohio State. And so these five-star athletes are really benefiting in the NIL era. They are going down the quality ladder, getting paid today, and our results in our paper also show that them going down the quality ladder in terms of a lower-ranked school don't impact their draft status at all. And so knowing that, they get to have their cake and eat it too. They get to have the NIL money today and still benefit from being drafted into the NFL later on.
Let's talk about some five-star athletes for a moment. Mm-hmm. I have a list here of the top five essentially the highest compensated by NIL. Arch Manning, $6.8 million. Carson Beck, $4.3 million. Jeremiah Smith, $4.2 million. AJ DeBansta, who's a basketball player, $4.1 million. And then Garrett Nussmeier, who is $3.7 million. That's a lot of money for, in some cases, people who, players who have not even really played that much football in their careers.
The NIL era has changed the game. It's changed the way schools recruit, how they recruit, being more strategic about who they go after. And so, it'll be fascinating to try to project what the amount of NIL money is in just college football alone. I'm going to have to take a wild guess that we're probably pushing $500 million.
And I do want to say these numbers are atypical. These are the top 5.
Yeah.
But in terms of your average athlete, the median or the mean, what is the dollar amount that someone should expect?
We actually have publicly available data to address this exact question. And what we found is that for Division I FBS football players, the average NIL deal in 2024 was roughly $63,000. Now, that's the average deal. The median deal was only $3,000. So there's a huge skewing of deals to the top players. And as you highlighted, the uber top players are getting the bulk of this money. It's a fascinating world out there. We're starting to see a bit more structure to it, given all the lawsuits. But in the early days, it was the wild, wild west. Schools, teams, players were doing whatever they could do to get away with.
If I'm a 5-star athlete, I could bet on a pretty good deal, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just what school is going to be interested in, and what school are you going to be interested in? Is dollars all that you care about, or are you caring about location to home? Are you caring about other facilities and the likes, and making your college decision when you are a high school senior going through the recruiting process? Pre-NIL, it was, hey, do I want to stay close to home? Do I want to go further away? Is the coach a great coach? Do they have a great program? Are they going to develop me and to be a great player and thus get into the NFL? For these 5-star athletes, the best of the best, there's only 35 to 40 of them every year that are classified as 5-star. They've recognized now that they don't need to be developed. They're already developed. Our data shows that these 5-star athletes have roughly a 68% chance of getting drafted, regardless of where they go. And then the next best is the 4-star athletes, around 27% or so. And then the 3-star athletes are at like 68%. Their God-given talent is just so good. They recognize they can go wherever they want to go and still have a high likelihood of getting drafted into the NFL, which is their end game. And so given that mentality and that knowledge and information, let's go to a school that's willing to pay for me. And so the interesting question is, which school do they go to now? And our data, as I've alluded to earlier, is that they're going to lower quality ranked schools relative to the pre-NIL era. And the rationale for that is that these lower ranked schools, like my alma mater, USC, they're now willing to pay more for this top athlete than a top program. The marginal benefit, if we're going to talk about it from an economics perspective, the marginal benefit of this top recruit 5-star athlete is greater for a USC today than it is for a Michigan or Ohio State or an Alabama or a Texas. And so given that marginal benefit and the impact that that student athlete will have on that team, they're now worth more, and so they're going to get a bigger NIL deal.
So it sounds like 5-star athletes have more choices. What about 3-star athletes?
Yeah, 3-star athletes is a fascinating group of players. They only have roughly about a 6 to 8% chance of getting drafted into the NFL. And what we found, though, unlike the 5-star athletes, where they go matters to an extent of how about the probability that they're going to get drafted, or the likelihood they're going to get drafted into the NFL. With a 6 to 8% probability, going to a good school now increases their likelihood. But unfortunately for them, that development isn't enough. It only increases their likelihood a couple percentage points. And so they're realizing they're still having a their likelihood of getting drafted is still under 10%. And so given that, and in the NIL era today, they have a similar mentality to the 5-star athletes, but for a different reason. They recognize that they're not likely going to get drafted into the NFL, or a really small probability. And so given that, they know they can still make money today through NIL, and they're also going to lower ranked schools because they want to get paid out today. And so what we're seeing here is that the 5-star athletes are going down. The 3-star athletes are also going down the quality ladder to get paid out, but for different reasons. The 4-star athletes are a unique bunch, and that depending upon where you fall in that numbering or ordering of athletes, somewhere between, let's just call it 40 to 200 or so, or 40 to 150 in the player rankings, they have a different viewpoint on college choice. They're now starting to think about, okay, I'm good enough to get to the NFL, but I need some development. I want to play. How do I go get the best development? How do I get developed to be the best player possible? You want to go to a great school. And so what we're seeing here is that those 5-star athletes are moving down. Those are opening up slots for the top end of the 4-star athletes. Now they're going up the quality ladder because they recognize that development matters and will have a meaningful impact on their likelihood of getting drafted. And so they recognize that, and so they're willing to take a lower NIL deal to go to a high-quality school to get developed. Because when you're thinking about it from the economics perspective, you want to maximize your income over the life cycle. And so if I maximize too much today, that might hurt my future prospects, depending upon who I am. And so if they're willing to take a large amount of money, that means them going to a lower-ranked school today, which could hurt their future income by not being as developed entering into the NFL. And so they're now having to weigh these two income streams in their decision-making on where they go to school now.
Let's talk about the universities or the colleges that are recruiting these players. How does NIL influence how a school wants to recruit them, or how does NIL influence, maybe not influence, but how does it impact the available pool of players?
That's a great question. Prior to this summer, I would have a different answer than it would be today because of the now settled House settlement. That's the settlement of that case was signed off this summer and now allocates a pool of revenue for schools to distribute to their athletes currently, but then also back pay some of their former athletes for those name, image, and likeness usage. That settlement is going to have a dramatic effect on how schools and programs recruit. Now, prior to the settlement, it was the Wild West. You had collectives. I think we'll still have collectives going forward, but it was all about the collectives, and the collectives drove the type of deals and the amount of money that were offered to these student athletes and college football players. And so from a recruiting perspective, pre-settlement, House settlement, it was really a negotiation outside of the confines of the college football program. It was between the recruit, the high schooler, and the collectives. And the collectives knew the needs of the program, but the coach and everything doesn't want to know the amount of money, et cetera. If we have the money, give the money, make that deal. And so now with the House settlement, those types of deals can become front and center. And that is no longer taboo or illegal to have those engagements, now permitted by the settlement to enter into negotiations with the school for your NIL rights and be paid for them. And so the big question that these universities are going to be having going forward is, how do I distribute that pot of money? And right now it's about $25 million a year that can be distributed across all their student athletes. So the question becomes is, how does that pot of money get distributed between college football players, basketball players, men and women basketball players, and then all the non-revenue generating sports as well? That's a handful of problems and issues and decisions to be made by the athletic directors.
And that brings up a good point, because a lot of that money, we could probably assume that it's going to be concentrated in college football and college basketball. What does that say for something like women's sports or Olympic sports? I know that some athletic departments at colleges are looking to also to just cut some of those regardless. And I'm just kind of curious, what does that mean for those athletes?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And so where does this $20 million come from? right? Now, it's not just, hey, the settlement happened and we have this $25 million to spend on our student athletes now to pay them. The athletic departments and the universities have to come up with this money. Is it cutting women's sports? Is it cutting Olympic sports? Is it cutting non-revenue generating sports? I don't like that. I'm a former college athlete myself, playing golf, and I would hate to see Olympic sports and non-revenue generating sports be cut to pay these other student athletes. I think some schools are doing some interesting things to help raise revenue. I think it was Tennessee last year announced that they would be implementing a ticket fee to pay the student athletes to now be able to compete in this world of NIL.
With NIL deals now a major part of the recruiting process, how can a high school athlete best evaluate offers from different schools, considering factors beyond the amount of money they're going to get?
From a marketing perspective, of me being a marketing faculty here at Tepper, it's not just about the dollars, and the dollars today particularly. It's about the dollars tomorrow and what that means. And so when we're thinking about selecting NIL deals, student athletes, college football players, they have to be cognizant of the brand that they want to create, not just for today, but going into the future, and building that brand and being selective on the initial endorsements or NIL activities they enter into, because it could have dramatic effects on their value going forward if they happen to choose the wrong product, the wrong company, the wrong service in their future NIL deals. And so being really strategic about the brands that they enter into agreements with is vital to maximizing their NIL return going forward.
So one last question. These are kids, and we're talking about them potentially being offered, millions of dollars before they actually set foot on a college football field or a college basketball court. That's a lot for an 18-year-old. I mean, you were a student athlete yourself. Just kind of think about that. If someone offered you $1 million, that's a lot for someone to really process at that age. And kind of like what you were saying earlier, you have to choose the right brand. You have to choose the right product. That is a lot for basically a kid to decide. And then also the point of college is really to get an education. As a former student athlete talking to someone in that situation, what would your advice be to them?
I would want to know their background, their economic background, their future goals, their interests, because the diversity in student athletes is really great. And you have really affluent student athletes that come from successful families that have made contributions to them to get where they are. And then you have other families that are struggling, that have sacrificed the entire world for their child to get to where they are today. And so my answer would be conditional on their background. But regardless of their background, I think they have to be thoughtful about how they use that money after taking care of their needs today. There are many student athletes that are quite successful in their sports, but are living day to day and struggling for food and the likes, and their families are. And so, taking care of your family first is of utmost importance. But then after that, how do you use that money for the long run? The average duration of an NFL football player, I can't imagine it much longer than 5 or 6 years. So what are you going to do after? Where does your education fit into that? Thinking about your education and the benefit of your education post your NFL career. How are you going to leverage that? How are you going to invest the money that you've received over your college careers from NIL deals? Just being strategic and thoughtful about the earnings that you've made today and how you can have them last as long as possible, but still enjoy the fruits of your labors during the hard times of high school and college football and NFL. And so being responsible with the money would be the advice I would give myself 20 some odd years ago. My son's 12 now. I'm just trying to imagine what would I tell him in 5 years' time if he happened to have this opportunity. I probably would tell him the same thing. Be thoughtful about how you spend your money, how you use your money, but also enjoy it.
Tim Derdinger, thank you. The paper is called Does Personalized Pricing Increase Competition? Evidence from NIL in College Football, and you can read it in Management Science. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode of the Tech Perspectives podcast.
The Tech Perspectives podcast is a production of the Carnegie Mellon University Tepper School of Business. To learn more, visit techperspectives.cmu.edu.